I've always been obsessed with the Addams Family, so that was another formative film that I loved as a kid. And I started in elementary school dressing up as Morticia Addams for Halloween because I've always also really loved Halloween. And that kind of spoke to me. Their otherness, they're weird, but they're also wonderful, and they wholeheartedly love each other for exactly who they are. And that seemed like the kind of family that I wanted to have, that I really thought was nice. So I've always loved the Addams Family, and that was kind of in the back of my mind. And I also really loved the show Pushing Daisies when it came out. And unfortunately, that show was canceled far too soon, and I've always been really grumpy about that. So I had been writing books and unsuccessfully trying to get agented, and I thought I will just let myself write something really weird that blends all the things that I love. So I want it to be a romantic comedy. I want it to have some kind of like darker humor to it. I want it to be an ode to the Addams Family and to Pushing Daisies and to all of these things that I loved. There are a lot of nods to Star Wars in here too. I am a nerd. So when I let myself write something really weird that was just for me, that's when I found like Azriel and Vicky, these characters who were inspired by all these things, but took on this completely new life of their own, where Azriel is this highly depressed and anxious witch who has magic, but also uses antidepressants. Like he takes SSRIs, better living through chemistry, not just through magic. And Vicky comes from a family that isn't so great, her family of origin, but she has a chosen family. So I was kind of pulling all these things that I had loved from books and media and putting them together into this weird thing that fantastically, somebody else liked enough to publish. Teaching is really important to me. And I loved the idea of making a character who switched into teaching and that became his dream job. Because I, as you can imagine, have grown tired of people saying to me, "Oh, did you become a teacher because you couldn't do the thing that you loved?" I love teaching. I love talking about books and I love writing books too. But I am still in the classroom. I do still think it's a thing that we should teach youngsters to aspire to. So I really wanted Azriel. First, I needed him to be far away for the second chance romance thing to work. But I really wanted him to be doing another career that he thought he would like. In this case, he was a screenwriter, and he realizes he doesn't really like that, and he sort of falls in love with teaching and has to accept that this job that sometimes society views as a little bit less glamorous is like really what he loves. And it's just a thing that makes him happy. So he moves back home and he goes back to the high school that he used to attend, because I think it's really funny to also have a character that says, "I'm never going back to where I went to high school." And then he ends up building his career there and being super happy. So we get that from him. And then for Vicky, we have her kind of trying to find her way through the path that her parents have set out for her. She's in college and then in business school, but she's really slow rolling it in that way that I think maybe only a rich kid can do. And so she finally comes back home and wants to own this tea shop, which her parents hate because it's not the kind of thing you want your wealthy daughter to do. So they've both really had to redirect their life in their late 20s, which to me feels authentic, that you might like in your late 20s really take a good look at your life and say, okay, I don't have everything figured out. Maybe I thought that I would. I think we kind of tell children this narrative of you turn 18, you turn 21, and you're an adult and everything just falls into place. But life is more complicated. People are more complicated, right? Like I'm in my late 30s and I'm still figuring things out. I expect I will be for my entire life. So I kind of wanted these characters to be authentically in the place that they were literally, but also in the place that they were chronologically in their lives. Hopelessly Teavoted was fun because it is this quirky, charming tea shop, but they also sell pastries and they also sell coffee. So I think you could also call it like a cafe. It has a punny title, which I do think that small town romances need to have a punny title in there. And it is a nod to the pie hole in Pushing Daisies, which is a pie shop. And I like to imagine it as having that sort of same beautiful, both bright and dark lighting. Like that show is just so incredible. They did everything from the costuming to the script to the way that it's lit. It's incredibly sad, but also funny and cheery at the same time. So I like to see Hopelessly Devoted the shop as like that as well. People could come there and they could sort of escape their worries for a little bit in the way that I hope most of us can do with a nice cup of coffee or cup of tea. I wish it really existed, but unfortunately I made it up. So there is Hank, who is a retired mailman who unfortunately has lost his husband to the pandemic. But in my mind, he does like this day where he dresses up as John Leguizamo's Chi-Chi from To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, which is just a fantastic film. So he is authentically himself, but he's also dealing with grief, which is a big theme in this book. Azrael, the main character, has lost his parents. The shop, Hopelessly Devoted, actually belonged to his mother. So Vicky had bought the shop from his sister. His sister had craftily neglected to tell him that the girl that he used to be in love with now owns this shop because she's a prankster and she's a younger sibling, and that tracks. So I think Hank is definitely one of my favorite patrons because he's authentically himself and he's lived and he's loved and he's grieving, but he's not, there's no point where I think he does that in an unhealthy way. And he sort of kind of meddles. There's a girl, Hazel, who's a high school student that works at the shop too. And I love pairing together. I love this trope in TV where you have like old man and young girl. And they sort of, it happens in The Witcher, it happens in The Last of Us, it happens in a lot of film where you have like a, they kind of adopt, Stranger Things. The I like that pairing of them sort of meddling in the love lives of the shop's owner. And then eventually, because Hazel is a student at the high school, she's also sort of prying into the love life of her teacher, which, as kids love to do. They love to know what's going on in their teachers' lives. So it was kind of a small thing with Hazel's character, but I think people often write off teenagers and their wisdom so quickly. Sometimes teenagers do really foolish things. It's not their fault biologically, their brains are still forming, but they also can be incredibly smart and insightful in that way that people who are going to tell you exactly what they think often are. So that was an important influence in Hazel's character, but also just for all of the characters. When I'm writing, I think I tend to be very direct and very straightforward and very honest. And some of that comes from spending so much time with teenagers for most of my adult life. But I also have really, like, I think I have good exposure in both the classroom and in my family. One of my sisters is a lot younger than I am. She's 8 years younger than I am. So I've always had kind of a foot in. I'm a millennial, but I'm an elder millennial, though I guess that's what they call my generation. And she's like the very cusp of, she's just barely still a millennial. So it's always been really interesting to me when I draft. She is not at all involved in writing. I do run things by her. She reads every book that I write. And she has really good insight, both because she's not connected to writing at all. She's a college strength and conditioning coach. And because she's got that kind of younger mindset where she'll tell me like, oh, this really doesn't work, Audrey. And I've had so many students who earnestly believed in me as a teacher and as a teller of stories that I think that helps with all of my writing, because teenagers don't tell you that they believe in you or that they think you're doing a good thing if they don't really mean it. I mean, sometimes like when grading time comes around, they might kiss ass a little bit, but for the most part, they're very honest. So it meant a lot to me over the years to have kids say, like, you do tell a really good story in class. Like, have you ever written down a story? So Azrael is a witch and he has snapping magic because he's Addams Family inspired. But he both can't fix everything with magic, and there are some things he's been taught not to. And I think that's really important in the magic structure. He talks about how his late father believed that you could summon materials to do the cleaning if you didn't have it, but you do actual cleanup, like if you're sweeping something up by hand, because the process of doing something and taking ownership of it is really important. So he's got magic. And that means he can summon things that aren't there, and he could fix something up or clean a room up. There's one point where he finger snaps and cleans all the cat hair off of the sheets, which I would love to be able to do. I have a cat, that would be useful. Um, and then Vicky, when they were growing up, was his almost perfectly normal, bubbly girl next door neighbor who also just happens to have death powers. So she can touch objects that were important to someone in their life and summon the ghost of that person, but only until the object burns, which takes 5 minutes. So she gets 5 minutes with each of these significant objects. And once all of those objects are gone, once the memory of you through the things that you have like imbued with your love and your attention during your life, once those are all gone, then you move on to whatever comes next, whatever final plane. We don't delve into it in this book. But the assumption is that then you're gone completely and you couldn't be summoned. So they have these powers, and I will say, because this is a thing that I did with great devious joy because of pushing daisies, that they are cursed so that she can't touch him without him bursting into flames and dying. So I love that, touch her and you die trope in romance, but instead of touch her and you die, this is touch her and I die. Which means if you're telling a love story between two people who maybe a third of the way into the book are cursed so they can't touch, I do it just exactly when they finally figure out that they both have feelings for each other, because I've read enough stories to not mind if I alarm my reader a little bit. Once they figure that out, then they can't touch. But now they know that they really love and lust for each other, and that makes things fun.